Welcome back to another video on the Maths channel. It's your teacher, Mr. Lim here, and in this video we'll be looking at how to find the midpoint and length of an interval. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to do these two things. Find the midpoint and length of a line interval with a graph and without a graph. So let's have a look at the first one, with a graph. When finding the midpoint and length of a line interval using a graph, drawing a right angle triangle will be your best friend. So I'm going to just draw one right here. Okay, so to find a midpoint, you can pick any one of the sides that you've just drawn and find the halfway point between it. So for example, here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Halfway point is 3. When we go all the way across, that's our midpoint. So we can see that the midpoint is equal to 2, 4. Okay, remember we always go across first before we go up or down. To find the length of an interval, we just use Pythagoras Theorem. Like I said, a right angle triangle will always help you. So we know that this length is 6. If we count across, we can see that that length is 6. So when we find the distance or the length, we know it's equal to the square root of 6 squared plus 6 squared, which is the square root of 72. Now, if the question asks you to leave your answer in exact form, that's what your answer will be. But if it says answer the question to 2 decimal places, then just use your calculator, 8.49. Okay, units. Let's have a look at question B. Same thing. We are going to create a right angle triangle. I'm going to pick any of these two sides that I just drawn. I'll pick the one going down. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So halfway of 7 is 3.5. So 1, 2, 3.5 is here. If I were to go all the way across until I hit the line, and that is the midpoint. So here, the midpoint is minus 1.5, or minus 3 over 2, half. Okay, so we go across to minus 1.5, and then we go up to half. So we've already established that this side has a length of 7. What about the other side that we drew? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 has a length of 9. So we want to find the length of this line interval, or the distance of this line interval. We can say that the length is equal to the square root of 9 squared plus 7 squared. So we know that 9 squared is 81, 7 squared is 49. So technically we have the square root of 130. Okay, so this is exact form. But like I said, if the question asks you to round it to 2 decimal places, then just square root that, and we'll get 11.40. And that's the 2 decimal places. Alright. Here's 2 more questions for you to try by yourselves. I'll get you to pause the video, have a go, and when you're done, then you can play the video again and I'll go through the solutions. Okay, so let's have a look at C. Like I said, all we need to do is draw a right angle triangle. I see that the rise is 3, the run is 4. I'm going to pick one of these two sides. Half of 4 is 2. 1, 2, so I'm just going to go all the way up. That's my midpoint. So my midpoint is 0, 1.5. Okay, or 3 over 2. If I want to find the length of this line interval, the length is just square root of 3 squared plus 4 squared, which is 5. For question D, let's draw our right angle triangle. Okay, the rise is 4 plus 3 is 7, run is 5. So I'm going to pick any one of these. I'll pick the half of 5 is 2.5. So 1, 2.5 go all the way up. That's my midpoint. So my midpoint is negative half, half. The length of this line interval is equal to the square root of 5 squared plus 7 squared, which is 8.6 to 1 decimal place. Okay. Now let's have a look at how to find the midpoint and distance of a line interval without a graph. Whenever we don't have a graph, it's best to use these two formulas. So the midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2. So because it's a midpoint, we need the x coordinate and we need the y coordinate. So the midpoint, as you know, mid means middle. We're just going to find halfway between the x coordinates and halfway between the y coordinates. That's why we add them together and divide by 2. We're just finding the average of those 2 points. The distance formula, here we've got d is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. If you think about it, it's very similar to Pythagoras Theorem. With the right angle triangles, we have the distance is equal to the square root of a squared plus b squared. Normally we have c. C is equal to the square root of a squared plus b squared. And this is a squared plus b squared. Okay, but in order to work out the length of a and b, we just take the x values and minus them, and add the y values and minus them and square them. Okay, so let's have a look at some examples. Find the midpoint and length of the interval between each pair of points. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to label these x1, y1, x2, y2. So the midpoint, we know, is x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2, which in this case is 7 over 2, 5. That's the midpoint. To find the length, the length is equal to the square root of y2 minus y1 squared plus x2 minus x1 squared. Let's see what we get when we put this in our calculator. Five. So the length of that line interval is 5. Let's do one more example together. So first thing is always label x1, y1, x2, y2. So the midpoint is x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2, which in this case is 3, 5. To find the length, we square root y2 minus y1 squared plus x2 minus x1 squared. Put that in our calculator. 9 minus 1 squared plus 6 minus 0 is just 6. And we get an answer of 10. Alright. Have a go with C and D yourselves. I'll get you to pause the video. And when you're done, you can continue playing the video to see whether you got the answers correct. Okay, so let's label x1, y1, x2, y2. Midpoints, x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2. That gives us minus 3 over 2 and 3 over 2. The length is equal to the square root of y2 minus y1, minus 1 is plus 1, plus x2 minus x1. So minus 3 becomes plus 3. When we put that in our calculator, what do we get? So we've got the square root of 5 squared plus 3 squared, 5.83. And that's the 2 decimal places. For question D, we have x1, y1, x2, y2. Midpoint x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2. That gives us an answer of half and 1. The length is equal to the square root of y2 minus y1 becomes plus 3 squared, plus x2 minus x1 becomes plus 2 squared. So when we put that in our calculator, we get the square root of 8 squared plus 5 squared is 9.43 to 2 decimal places. And that's it for this video. So by now you should know how to find the midpoint and length of a line interval using a graph and without a graph.